Richard Dawkins, trans people. Here it is.
Okay, the next question from Angie. Why do you, a man of science, deny the reality that trans people exist? Why do you feel the need to hate a minority group that only wants to live their life as their true self and be left alone?
Seems like a fair question to me. But let's see what old Richie Doc has to say about it, huh?
That's a ridiculous question.
It's a ridiculous question, is it? I don't know. Seems like a reasonable one to me, but hey, I'm a crazy fucking guy. I got a lot of fucking, I'm kind of a nut job myself, so hey, what do I know? Maybe this posh British man, he's going to explain to me the error of my fucking fucked up ways. Let's hear it.
I don't deny their existence, and I don't in any way oppress them.
Okay, well, that's good. Good. All right, I guess that settles that then. I guess we can, for the sake of posterity, press the play button again, but it seems like that pretty much is the kicker right there, I don't deny they exist. I'm not trying to oppress them. Okay. Well, segment aborted. I guess we didn't need to even cover this because it seems like everything's fine.
What I object to is the statement, a woman can have a penis. A trans woman is a woman. I object to that because that...
Oh. So trans people are allowed to exist, but they're not allowed to exist in any meaningful way, I guess. I don't know. Like, it doesn't, okay. Let me try to figure this out. Trans woman, not a woman. Woman, no penis, but trans people are allowed to exist. I don't know. It's not quite. It seems like I can't. It's like when you're trying to stick two magnets together on the wrong end and they just don't quite want to go together. These two concepts that you've just thrown out there don't really seem to go together. So they're allowed to exist, but they're not allowed to identify the way they want to, which means they're essentially not allowed to exist unless, I guess they're allowed to exist, but they're not allowed to exist in a way that's comfortable for them. Like, they can exist, but it has to be in a state of constant gender dysphoric misery. Okay. Maybe I'm not understanding something. Let's delve a little deeper. Hey, if you like this clip, you might like the full stream, which I do every Sunday, more or less, over on the Pessimist Productions Patreon, link down below. Thank you kindly.
That's a distortion of language and a distortion of science. But as to saying they don't exist, that's absurd. Of course they exist. And there's no reason why they shouldn't exist.
Okay.
Right. And I find
okay. Good. Yeah, I'm glad you're at least that far along, if someone came to me and said, Richard Dawkins, do you support murdering all trans people? I would say, no, not particularly, no. Okay.
I find that it's so easy in these conversations nowadays because language has been co-opted in such a way where...
Language has been co-opted. What a weird sentiment that is. These people seem to think that language is this static thing. If that were the case, there would only be one language. Like, language never would have evolved to include new words. Language never would have deviated into different languages. Like, there's a reason why Latin is the root language of a lot of other languages. It's because they were all once the same language. You would think a guy who specializes in evolutionary biology would be able to kind of understand this, but apparently not. Apparently, any sort of change to language is now, I guess, sinful or co-opting for nefarious purposes or something. I don't understand. Language changes. Language evolves. Language as we use it now is different than language as we used it 100 years ago or 1,000 years ago. And the further back you go, the more different the usage of language gets. But now language has to be static. Now no further changes are allowed to language. I guess that in the opinion of Richard Dawkins and whoever this chick is, we have arrived at peak language, perfect language, and no more changes in language can be abided by. Is that what's going on here? Because that seems a little strange. Like, why does that need to be the case? Very odd. Let's find out.
You can't actually say something as it is without being accused of, denying that someone exists.
Well, exactly. Yes. I mean, to go from saying that a trans woman is not a woman as a scientific fact to saying you think they don't exist, meaning they don't live and they shouldn't live, that's ridiculous.
But you don't want them to be able to live authentically, so it basically seems like you're saying they shouldn't exist as they exist now. I mean, it's like saying, like, okay, well, tall people, I believe that, they should exist, but they should be shorter. You know what I mean? Like, I think being over 6 feet tall, that's just kind of like weird. They should just knock that off. If you got to go shave a few inches off, something, whatever, get some kind of shortening surgery or something. I don't know. Got to fix yourself. You're too damn tall. Like, I don't get it. Because to me, if you're going to say that a group of people are allowed to exist, then they should be allowed to exist without sort of like all these weird impositions and restrictions being placed upon them. It's like saying, oh, well, sure. A person with left-wing politics should be allowed to exist, or a person with right-wing politics should be allowed to exist, but they shouldn't be able to espouse their opinions on things, right? Yeah, I mean, I believe in freedom of speech, but I think, people shouldn't actually do it. People shouldn't actually use it for anything. They should just, kind of shut the fuck up. Doesn't really seem like you believe in free speech at that point, other than in some like vague, nebulous, difficult to define way. Like, you can't say, I believe this thing has a right to exist, and then put all these weird arbitrary limitations on it, especially when the limitation just seems to be argument over the word woman is not allowed to change to encompass new things. Like, we're not allowed to say, hey, we invented the word woman, we invented the social roles that are associated with it, but we are not allowed to expand it to include people who have penises, because that's just a bridge too far. Why? It's our word. We made it up. There's nothing scientific about it. There's nothing special about it. We have a different word for the scientific designation of female and male. The word woman is a social term. It's not used scientifically to describe like having a vagina or having a uterus or anything like that. Like, that's never been the terminology. The terminology for that has been female. Now, maybe colloquially you could say woman and it'd be associated with that in previous eras and by some people to this day. But to object to trans women being able to use the word woman just seems like a glorified semantics argument. Because no one is saying that a trans woman becomes biologically female. No one is saying that their sex characteristics change magically. No one says that. What's being said is that someone with a penis can still occupy the social designation of woman. What is the dire repercussion of that? Maybe he'll explain.
Yeah.
I'm fed up with that kind of distortion.
Or to assume that what you're saying...
I mean, it's not a distortion. It's language evolving, as language has always done. Like, culture evolves, language evolves alongside it. So what?
Is somehow hateful. That too, right?
Well, quite. I mean, that's totally ridiculous. It's simply a scientific fact that sex is determined in a biological way.
Right. No one's arguing with that, though. Sex is determined in a biological way. That's fine. That can continue to be the case. I don't understand. There's no contradiction here, bro. There's no contradiction. Sex can continue to be defined by physiological markers. Sex can continue to be defined by birth. Sex continue to be defined that way because it would be incongruent. Like, it would actually cause problems to define sex otherwise. Like, it's important in certain context for a person's sex to be immutable. But it's not at all important in those contexts for their gender to be immutable. And these are not the same thing, and I feel like that's been explained to you. So what is your actual objection?
Which I could go into, but probably won't.
Okay.
The fact that people have a psychological feeling that they're born into the wrong body, that's a psychological fact, which I think is probably true. Okay. And I have great sympathy with such people.
Well, I mean, if you really had such sympathy with them, then I think you would want to do what's best for them, which is to allow them to adopt the social designation that they want to fit into. Like, it seems like that would be the bare minimum you could do for such a person that you apparently are so sympathetic towards, right? Like, I am incredibly sympathetic towards them, but they can't have the word woman. They can't have it. It's not theirs. They'll have to find some other word. Okay. Doesn't really seem like you're all that sympathetic if you're not even willing to fucking marginally budge on the definition of a fucking word.
I actually was just thinking about this this last week, and I'm curious what you feel some of the larger implications might be for science.
There are none.
These sort of culture wars, given that all of scientific study separates people by sex. You have your
Which is fine, you stupid fucks. That's fine. No one's trying to stop you from fucking doing that. You can still do that. I'm sorry. I don't know. Is this really that fucking complicated for these supposedly intelligent people to grasp? That there is a difference between the societal roles imposed on genders and associated with genders and associated with appearances and the sexual characteristics of that person? Like, is it really so hard to just delineate? I mean, like, you look at fucking taxonomy, something that Richard Dawkins does understand. It's insanely complicated with a million little divergences and like subgroups and subcategories. But somehow this issue is just, whoa, it boggles his fucking mind. It's just too complicated. It's too complicated to separate sex and gender into two different ideas. I can't handle it. I can't hang with it. I just don't get it.
Male and your female studies being done, it's very important to do so. What happens when all of a sudden, we're sort of denying that fact?
Yeah.
No one is. So nothing. Idiot.
Yes, well, sex throughout the animal and plant kingdoms is defined by gamete size.
Okay.
Sperms are tiny compared with eggs, and that defines the sexes all over the animal kingdom.
Fine.
And we understand why that is. We understand how that came about. We understand the universality of it. That is the universal biological definition of sex differences.
Fine.
The way sex is determined.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. No one objects. Any objections, anybody? No. No one objects. That's fine. That can continue to be the case forever and ever.
Determined in various animals is very different. In mammals, it's the XXXY system. In birds, it's a similar system, but the other way around. As you know, in mammals, it's the XY that's the male. In birds, it's the equivalent of the XY that's the female. In many reptiles, it's done by temperature.
Okay.
In some fish, it's done by dominance hierarchy. So there are a lot of different ways in which sex is determined in embryology. But sex is defined by gamete size. And that's a universal.
Is there going to be any sort of acknowledgement of the fact that that's still fine and that no one objects to that, and that this is just sidestepping the entire argument because it's not about sex, it's about gender, it's not about it's about woman and man, not about male and female. And I get that for a long time, those things were interchangeable. And I get that maybe there's a little curmudgeonliness of like, I don't know if I want to. But like you already said, you believe that trans people exist. You have tremendous sympathy towards those people. So wouldn't you want to do what's best for them? And just kind of like loosen up those definitions a little bit for their sake, to accommodate them a little bit? If they start trying to fucking get you to change the definition of scientific sex, then I will be right there on your side, bro. I'll be right there like, guys, that just doesn't make sense. We can't do that. There are certain things in science that need to be tethered to sex and not gender identity. You can't identify as a different sex, but a different gender, sure, why not? You want to present as female, even though you're male? You want to have a female appearance? Rock on. You want to have a social role more traditionally associated with female than male? Rock on. But at the end of the day, your sex characteristics, especially internally, are always going to be associated with your sex as defined by, you know, all the stuff Richard Dawkins just laid out. Gametes and chromosomes and shit like that. I don't think trans people have a problem with that. Maybe some of them might not emotionally like that or whatever, but I don't think that any of them have a fucking problem with that, because it's recognizable that there would be negative repercussions scientifically if we just abandoned that designation entirely and just said it's all up to you. But when it comes to social roles and appearance and all those other things and how people are treated in society, then they should be able to do whatever the fuck they want, because there's no harm to anyone else. There's no harm to anyone else from a trans woman identifying as a woman. There's no harm to anyone else from a trans man identifying as a man. There's no harm to them presenting the way they want to present, occupying the social role that they want to occupy. Like, where is the fucking fire, my man? Where is the acid rain coming to melt all our faces off if we allow that to happen? Because this entire time, you've not made even one argument against that, other than just like, they're changing words. Stupid, meaningless, trivial, superficial fucking argument on that front. And the rest of it has just been conflating gender and sex, a difference that I know for a fact has been explained to you probably multiple times, and I've never once heard you actually substantively attempt to refute.
Biological definition, there are no exceptions to that.
Okay.
What are your thoughts on the rise of pseudoscience and
Well, that's the end of the segment there. Oh no, I guess this also addresses the trans issue.
anti-scientific sentiment in contemporary society, just as we were speaking about? This is a question.
Yes, I'm not sure what the questioner has in mind there. If it is about the denial of sex differences, then I guess we've just covered it. But maybe they mean something else.
I think that was certainly an example that fits.
Well, creationism would be another stark case.
All right, she didn't read the whole question, so he doesn't know the whole question. He didn't see the example. She didn't read the example, and he's pivoting to creationism. So I guess this segment is over. But man, I would love to see Richard Dawkins stop being a fucking retard on this issue, so I could like have a modicum of respect for the guy again. But I guess he's probably not necessarily vying for the respect of like Mr. Warpaint over here, so whatever. The amazing